Hi, I'm Colonel Culpepper here, and I am your guide to the southern colonies. Let's start with Virginia. Jamestown was the first permanent English colony in North America and was part of Virginia. With tobacco taking off, Virginia took off and needed workers to keep growing. The colony began to import African slaves in from the Dutch. Many people that came to Virginia were indentured servants that worked for their passage to America for a certain number of years. Now, Maryland was a whole other deal. George Calvert was a Catholic, and he wanted a safe place for Catholics because they were being persecuted in England. When Lord Calvert died, the colony went to a son that named it Maryland after Mary, the mother of Jesus. There was a dispute between the boundaries between Pennsylvania and Maryland, and two men were hired to map the boundary. They were Charles Mason and Jeremiah Dixon. The line became known as the Mason-Dixon line. Maryland let Protestants as well as Catholics in, and before long there were more Protestants than Catholics. To protect the Catholics, they wrote a law called the Religious Toleration Act of 1649, and it gave both groups the right to practice freely. Virginia ran into problems too. Their governor promised the Native Americans that the settlers would not push into their lands if they gave them a huge piece of land. Nathaniel Bacon didn't agree with Berkeley, the governor of Virginia, or the government of Virginia altogether, whom he thought had too many Easterners in it. He led a rebellion that attacked the natives and burned Jamestown. The Carolinas, just south of Virginia, the colony of Carolina was established by King Charles II. He created a colony and named it Carolina, which means in Latin, Charles's land. John Locke, who would go on to be a major inspiration to Thomas Jefferson in the Declaration of Independence, wrote the Constitution for Carolina. Eventually, Carolina became too big for one government, so they split it into two, North Carolina and South Carolina. Carolina was an agricultural colony, and rice, indigo, and tobacco were the cash crops that they grew. Eventually, the Carolinas became a royal colony. Georgia was set up by James Oglethorpe when he got a charter from George II. It was a place where debtors and poor people could get a fresh start. In England, people who could not pay their debt were put into debtor's prison. They also thought that Georgia could act as a buffer from attacks by Spain, who owned Florida.